The message came at 7:03 p.m. I had just finished tying a gold ribbon around the last gift when my phone buzzed. I wiped my hands on the dish towel, picked it up, and read the screen. Don't come for Christmas. Jessica is uncomfortable. No hi, Mom. No sorry. Just that. 8 words. Blunt, final. Like they'd rehearsed it. I didn't move for a while. The steam from the kettle fogged the window behind me. Outside, the wind shook the bare trees. Inside, my dining table sat quietly set, with small, carefully wrapped packages. Tea blends, homemade preserves, puzzles for the kids. I had even bought a matching set of pajamas for the family photo Jessica always insisted on posting. I sat down slowly, my knees stiff from standing too long. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel surprised. That's the part that stung. I had expected something like this. Maybe not a flat-out rejection, but a cold shoulder, a clipped conversation. One of those silent performances where you smile for the guests and avoid eye contact with the person who raised you. I reached for the laptop without thinking, like muscle memory. County clerk. Property search. Parcel ID. I knew the numbers by heart. The deed popped up in less than a minute. Owner of record Corlina Marrow. My name. Still there. They never transferred it. They never even asked. I stared at it, not with shock, but with a strange, settling calm. Like something I'd been trying to ignore had finally taken form. They had shut me out of the house I gave them, but they'd forgotten I never actually gave it away. I closed the laptop gently and picked up the bag of gifts. The ribbon came loose from one of them as I walked it to the hallway closet. I left it there, untouched. Then I poured a cup of tea, sat back down, and reached for my phone again. This time, I wasn't waiting for a reply, I was looking up a number. It didn't start with hostility. Jessica had been all smiles the day they moved in. I remember her taking a picture on the porch, holding the keys up like a trophy. We're so lucky, she had said, kissing Miles on the cheek. And maybe they were. I had used part of Harold's pension and the small inheritance from my sister to help with the down payment. Paid the first year's property taxes outright. No loans, no strings, just one understanding that the house would be in my name until they could afford to take it over properly. Back then, Jessica said she liked the idea of family being close. It'll be good for the kids to have their grandma nearby, she said. So I visited often. I brought groceries. I picked up mail when they traveled. I helped paint the nursery when they found out about Ava. But something changed after Ava was born. Jessica started using the word boundaries. At first it was gentle. Just text before dropping by, it helps me keep the baby on schedule. Then it became, actually Fridays don't really work anymore. Then months passed, and I'd only see Ava in photos. The front porch light I once replaced had a new bulb flickering faintly whenever I drove past. I told myself it was just the rhythm of new parenthood. Stress, distance. But tonight's message wasn't stress. It was exclusion. Cold, polished exclusion. I stared at my empty teacup and picked up the phone. Miles didn't answer. He rarely did without a text first. So, I called someone who would. Marla, I said. When the line picked up, my lawyer sounded surprised to hear from me. I think it's time we reviewed the deed, I said, and the rights that come with it. She didn't ask why. She simply replied, come in tomorrow. Bring anything you still have in writing. I said I would. Then I hung up, got up from the table and went to find the file folder in the back of my cabinet. Marla laid out the documents on the table between us like she was setting a quiet trap. This, she said, tapping the top page, is the deed. Still in your name, no transfer, no trust agreement, no formal lease, just verbal understanding. I nodded, staring at the paper with my name printed clean across the top. Corlina E. Marrow. I hadn't seen it in years, but it hadn't changed. They've made a lot of assumptions, she added. Because I let them, I said. My voice was steady. No anger, no bitterness, just fact. Marla sat back in her chair, watching me closely. What do you want to do? It was the first time someone had asked me that in a long time. I don't want to take anything from them, I said. I never did. I just wanted to be part of their lives, to be respected in my own home even if I wasn't living in it. She nodded slowly. That's not unreasonable, but right now they're living in a house you paid for under a roof that legally belongs to you, and they've told you you're not welcome. I looked down at my folded hands. Jessica's message played again in my mind, cold and efficient, like a clipped business memo. Not even signed with Miles' name. I had raised him to speak gently, to look people in the eye, to offer his seat at the table. Now he was sending me away from a holiday I used to host while still living off what I'd left behind. Let's start with a utilities review, I said. Then the property assessment. I want to know what's changed. Marla reached for her pen. Good. We'll go from there. As I stood to leave, I paused at the door. It's not about revenge, I said, turning back. It's just... They made it clear I'm not family anymore. She met my eyes, quiet. Then maybe it's time the house reflects that. I nodded once and stepped out into the hall, already thinking about what names still appeared on the water bill. When I got home, I didn't sit down. I went straight to the small desk by the window and opened my laptop again, this time with a list I hadn't realized I'd been keeping in my head for years. Water, electric, internet. Each account still carried my name. I had left them that way out of habit at first. Then convenience. Then something softer. I didn't like to examine too closely. Love, probably. It felt easier to keep paying than to ask my son to remember one more responsibility. Easier to be helpful than to be visible. I logged into the water company's website. Autopay active, my card on file. I removed it with 2 clicks. The confirmation email arrived almost instantly. Service would continue for 48 hours before interruption. I did the same with electricity, then internet. With each confirmation, I felt a strange lightness. Not relief exactly, but clarity. These weren't punishments, they were corrections. I wasn't taking something away. I was stepping back into my own place. The phone rang twice while I worked. I didn't answer. I already knew who it was. Afterward, I made another call. This one was shorter, more procedural. The city's building inspection office didn't ask why I wanted a visit. They just asked for the address, the owner's name, and a preferred date. I gave them all 3. No need to notify the occupants, the woman on the line said. We'll announce ourselves. That's fine, I replied. I stood by the window after I hung up, watching a car pass slowly on the street. I wondered if Miles would notice the change right away, or if Jessica would be the first to realize something was different. I wondered if either of them would connect the silence of my phone to the absence of light in their house. They had asked for distance, for boundaries, for space. This was what that looked like when it followed the rules. I closed the laptop and picked up my coat, suddenly aware that I would need to visit the house soon, not as a guest, not as an intruder, but as the owner, and that what I found there would determine what came next. The inspection happened on a gray Thursday morning. I wasn't there when the inspector arrived. I didn't need to be. He had my authorization, my name on the file, my signature already logged with the city. Jessica answered the door according to his report. She didn't question him, didn't ask for identification beyond the badge clipped to his coat. She assumed, I suppose, that anyone with confidence belonged there. By the time he called me later that afternoon, his voice had shifted from neutral to careful. They've removed a load-bearing wall between the kitchen and living room, he said. No permit on record. There's also a converted laundry area off the hallway, again no permit. And there's visible moisture damage near the basement foundation. That one concerns me. I wrote everything down even though he said he'd send a full report by email. Old habits. I listened without interrupting, thanked him, and hung up. When the report arrived, I read it once, then again, not with anger, but with a slow, steady focus. Each page felt like the house speaking back to me quietly, listing what had been done to it without my knowledge. Walls altered, pipes rerouted, decisions made as if I no longer existed. That evening, as I was folding laundry, my phone rang. It was Ruth, the woman who lived 2 houses down from them. We'd exchanged numbers years ago, back when I still stopped by unannounced. "I didn't know if I should tell you," she said carefully, "but there was a small party last night. I heard Jessica laughing. She said you were finally out of their lives, that the house was theirs now." I thanked her, truly. She sounded relieved when we hung up, like she'd been carrying something that wasn't hers. I sat at my desk after that and opened a blank document. I didn't rush. I typed slowly, deliberately. A formal notice. 30 days. Grounds clearly stated. No emotion. No commentary. At the end, I attached the inspection report. I printed 2 copies, signed both, and placed them in a folder labeled only with the address. Then I set the folder by the door, knowing it wouldn't stay there long. Miles called the next morning. I recognized the hesitation before I even answered the pause between rings, the breath he took before speaking. "Mom," he said, voice thin. I didn't mean it like that. The text. "Jessica's just been overwhelmed." I didn't respond right away. I listened to the faint hum on the line, the sound of someone waiting to be forgiven before they'd finished explaining themselves. "When was the last time either of you said thank you?" I asked. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then he exhaled slow and unsteady. "That's not fair," he said finally, but there was no conviction in it. I paid the down payment. I continued keeping my tone even. I covered the taxes. I kept the utilities in my name for years. I stayed quiet when visits became invitations. I stayed quieter when they stopped. I'm not asking for praise, Miles. I'm asking when I stopped being acknowledged. He didn't answer that either. This has gotten out of hand," he said. "We didn't expect things to go this far. We thought maybe we could make an offer, buy the house from you." Officially, there it was, not an apology, a transaction. I closed my eyes, not because I was tired, but because I needed the room to choose my words carefully. "Get a formal offer," I said. "In writing. I'll send it to my lawyer." "What Mom can't, we just talk about this first?" "We've been talking for years," I replied. "This time we do it properly." He sounded frustrated now, like a child being told the rules after years of exceptions. "You're making this so complicated." "No," I said softly. "I'm making it clear." We ended the call shortly after that. No resolution, no warmth, just a quiet understanding that something fundamental had shifted, and neither of us could pretend otherwise. I set my phone down and opened my laptop, again already anticipating what a formal offer would reveal, not just about the value they placed on the house, but about how they had come to measure me within it. The offer came 3 days later, dropped off by courier in an envelope that felt heavier than it should have. I waited until I was in Marla's office before opening it. She read through it once, then again slower. "They're offering $85,000 below the current market value," she said, her mouth tightening. "And they've excluded all structural repairs from their responsibility." I didn't flinch. I had expected worse. "They're assuming you're too tired to fight," she added. "That you'll just take what you can and let go." I reached into my bag and pulled out the file we'd started: utility records, the inspection report, the original property deed, and the 30-day notice with a timestamp. Everything in order. Everything traceable. "I'm filing," I said. "Eviction. Misuse of property, unauthorized changes, and hostile environment," she finished, nodding. "I'll have it ready by this afternoon." It went through faster than I thought. No one contested the paperwork, at least not formally. But Jessica did make her voice heard. She showed up at the hearing, perfectly made up and brimming with performance. Told the judge I was a bitter woman. that I'd been meddling since the day they moved in, that I was trying to take control of their lives because I didn't have one of my own. I didn't interrupt. I didn't even look at her. When it was my turn, I simply handed over the documents. I let the dates speak, the payments, the notices, the lack of response, the repairs done without permission, the photos from the inspector showing exactly what corners had been cut and hidden. The judge didn't look at me with pity. He looked with certainty. "You have every right to pursue possession," he said. I nodded once. I didn't smile. When I left the courthouse, the sun was low behind the trees. I walked to my car slowly, the wind catching my coat, and sat for a moment before driving off. They had made their arguments loud, but I didn't need volume, I had proof. And now I had a date. One last date circled in red on my calendar, when everything would become real. It was Christmas morning when the locksmith arrived. He was younger than I expected, polite and quick with his work. I showed him the court order, the ID, and the paperwork authorizing the change. He asked no questions, just nodded and got to it. The utilities had already been shut off 2 days earlier. Water, electricity, internet. I had arranged it all in sequence, timed, so nothing would feel abrupt, only final. By the time the new locks clicked into place, the sun had barely risen. The frost on the ground sparkled beneath my shoes as I stepped back and watched the house settle into stillness. It no longer looked like a home to me, just a structure, worn and repurposed without permission. The officer stood beside me, calm and unreadable. He had been required to witness the rekeying standard procedure with formal evictions. He didn't speak much, just nodded when the locksmith handed over the keys. We didn't have to wait long. By early afternoon, Miles and Jessica pulled into the driveway, their SUV still dusty from the mountain road. I saw the moment they noticed the envelope taped to the door. Jessica stepped out first. Miles lingered behind. She yanked the paper free, skimmed it, then tried the knob. When it didn't turn, she began pounding, first with her hand, then with the flat of her palm, then both fists. I sat in my car across the street, engine off, heat fading slowly. I didn't hide, but I didn't make myself obvious either. The officer stood a few feet away from me now, watching as Jessica shouted something I couldn't hear through the glass. Miles didn't join her. He stayed near the car, arms crossed, jaw tight. I didn't feel triumph, only stillness. A quiet ending that didn't require applause. When Jessica finally noticed me, she pointed, yelling something at Miles. He didn't move. I didn't wave. I didn't flinch. I turned the key in the ignition and drove down the block. The officer already walking back to his patrol car as I turned the corner toward home. The house felt heavier than I remembered. Not messy, not damaged beyond repair, just used. There were scuff marks along the baseboards where toys had rolled too hard. Sticky patches on the kitchen counter where fruit juice must have dried. Cabinets hung slightly uneven, as if someone had tried to fix them without knowing how. It smelled faintly of lavender cleaner and something else underneath, something sour, like too many meals cooked without joy. I walked from room to room without touching anything. The walls were still the same pale color I had chosen years ago. Jessica had added a few mirrors, a new rug, but it all felt temporary, like they never truly believed they'd stay. The master bedroom was stripped, drawers emptied, closets cleared. They had taken what they wanted and left nothing behind, not even a note. I didn't expect one. When I opened the guest room closet, I froze. My winter coat was still hanging there, the navy one with the quilted lining and the tiny rip at the cuff. I had left it during one of those early visits back when Ava was a baby, and Jessica still pretended to like me. I'd asked about it months later. She said it wasn't there. I reached out and touched the sleeve. The fabric was cold but familiar. I pulled it out gently and held it in my arms for a long minute. Then I draped it over the armchair by the window and opened the curtains. The afternoon sun streamed in, and for the first time in years, the house didn't feel like someone else's. It was quiet, but not the kind that made you feel forgotten. I spent the rest of the day wiping down surfaces, opening windows, breathing the place back into something I could recognize. That night, I moved my books into the guest room, stacked them beside the chair, brought in a lamp, a blanket. I made tea and sat down under the coat, letting its weight settle across my lap. No apologies had come, no calls, no closure. But I didn't need any of it. I had my name, my keys, and a room of my own again. The snow began before sunrise. Light at first, almost hesitant, then steady as the morning unfolded. I placed a few logs into the fireplace and struck a match, watching the flame catch at the edges before settling into a low, living warmth. I moved slowly that day. Not from fatigue, but because there was no longer a rush. The house didn't feel like it was waiting for someone else. There were no expectations to meet, just small rhythms to follow: boiling water for tea, sweeping the hall, folding the same blanket I'd tucked around myself the night before. The letter arrived in the early afternoon. A cream envelope, hand-addressed. I knew the handwriting without reading the name. Inside, an apology. Formal, too clean. Miles had written it like a man hoping to settle accounts, not speak from the heart. He said Jessica had filed for separation, that he was staying with friends, that things had unraveled quickly after the eviction after the holiday, without heat, without light, without access. He didn't ask to return. He didn't mention Ava. I folded the letter, once set it aside, and returned to watering the small indoor tree I had bought a few weeks earlier. A ficus in a ceramic pot. It sat in the corner of the living room now, where their old shoe rack used to be. I liked the way its leaves caught the sun through the front window. Later that week, I donated the unused coats and unopened toys to the shelter downtown. A young woman with wind-chapped cheeks thanked me twice, her voice hoarse from the cold. I signed up to volunteer the following Saturday. Sorting supplies. Nothing dramatic. Just motion with purpose. Evenings came gently now. I no longer filled the silence with background noise. The stillness didn't feel like absence, it felt earned. I kept the fireplace going as the sky dimmed. Wrapped in my quilt, I watched the snow fall beyond the glass, quiet and unhurried. No phones rang. No one knocked. It didn't feel like an ending. Just a season shifting finally without resistance.